anyone who knows the Amish knows, I mean, Pennsylvania and what Ohio just left of it, or west of it, that's like Amish land. I mean, that's really so deep Amish. You have so much rural communities, and to bomb that with toxicity, they're destroying biodiversity, microbiomes in the soil that probably exist nowhere else in this country. Yeah.
Yeah, they've been regenerative for a century.
Yeah.
So think about them, and just become an Amish for a second, that you've lived off the land your whole life. Everything you've ever consumed has been made on the property or traded with another property. And suddenly you have to go into a Western supermarket to buy all your food because your soil's too contaminated to grow your own food.
All right. David DuByne is on Radiant Creators. This is David DuByne from Adapt 2030. Certainly been on the show plenty of times in the past. And we're just here to catch up. That's what we're doing. That's kind of the whole point of it. There's so much going on in the world. Pick your psyop, whichever one entertains you the most, and we can just dive right in. So that's a good thing. Okay, I think we can see it pretty big there. There we go.
Does it say mother of all catastrophes, misspelled at the top there?
Yes, and the misspelling is very, very important, because that's
misspelling actually adds character to the presentation.
Because that's the real spelling. See,
I didn't want to have one catastrophe. I needed several, so I had to put the IES on it.
Yeah.
Come on now, man. Let me go big with the plurals here. Come on. But that's the fire, and it's so apropos that it's behind a farm right there. And a lot of these are all small farm holders. World record food prices, and then we got the clowns in America telling us that to save money, we need to skip breakfast.
Yes.
That's not acceptable in today's age in this country, that our food prices have risen so high that you're telling people that can't afford it, just don't eat breakfast. Get away from me. This is how societies have fallen throughout history. And Craig, you are a great studier of history yourself. You know that this is how all civilizations end. With the very beginnings of this. Skip food. No. It's the most important thing for humans, except maybe, water and air. But the leaders of a nation cannot tell their citizens, just don't eat. That's not acceptable. Throughout the time span of 12,000 years, that's unacceptable, and it's still unacceptable today.
And it's an accusation. It's an assumption. It's an assumption and an accusation that you eat too much. And this is one of the things that I've learned recently since 2019, especially with the struggling economy, the devaluation of the dollar, lockdowns, the whole disaster that we've been living through, is that there's this assumption that Americans live beyond their means. And yes, some do, but most really don't have interest in living beyond their means. And really most don't. And most that do have debt only have it for either a mortgage or because they're, not able to make it, and they're not living in extravagance. They just can't make it, and they're going in the hole every month or every quarter. So, when they say just don't eat breakfast, well, that's saying, well, you're fat and you eat too much. You know what I mean? Where I would say most people, that has nothing to do with their reality. That's most people, even if they're eating unhealthy and they're maybe chubby or, unwell, most people don't live that extravagantly. And that's really, like I say, that's a huge psyop in itself, which they laid on us with that statement.
Yeah, true. And then, what's going on in India really baffles me as well. Like, they claim that their grain production is at the record highest level ever in Indian history, the most 323 million tons. Yet you look at their food price inflation at 16+% per month.
Oh my God.
Per month. India. Yeah, that's just the January inflation was 16% on the food. So I'm wait a second here. How are you having record grain and food production, yet your food costs are running at that high? That's something kind of breaks there. And then, I scrubbed up this chart here. The Indian national prices for wheat. Well, you're way better than I with the supply demand side on, valuations of companies and service. I mean, how do you get wheat prices skyrocketing per metric ton this high when they have the record all-time production? Something just doesn't sit right with this. The world prices aren't at the all-time record high right now. They were last year. But this year they're not as high as they were up at, so I just don't get it.
India should be fighting deflation, should be the problem if they have, an abundance of wheat. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, you can see it on all sides. So, what are they telling the Indian citizenry over there? Oh, just don't eat. There's a lot of people over there that exist on just a few dollars a day. That it's a very, stratified society. And there are a couple 100 million people that are living on just a few dollars a day.
If
Now, what
that.
happens when they say enough is enough?
Yeah. And that's the truth. That's one of the things that we're seeing. I think we're beginning to see that in Europe too, where especially with you have the GSM, of course, Grand Slow Minimum, that accounts for a lot of this, but also when you do look at the Ukrainian proxy war, kind of like the neoconservatives, neoliberals against organic humans, you might say, like in India that you're speaking about now. Especially if it's a scam and the people know it's a scam and they're saying just don't eat. Yeah, how long when there's that many people and the government is like 0.0001% of the population? The population could just fart at them all at once, and it would just be the end of that government.
Yeah, and there was something that would have to replace it that was functional.
Yeah.
And then, this is the excuse that the politicians, well, if you take us all out of power, there'll be nobody that can restructure and know the law enough to run the government. Oh, no, we could scrap all those hundreds of thousands of laws and make it super simple. First is the 10 commandments out of the Bible. We'll abide by those first. And then, like the simple things of don't break your contract. All right.
Don't kill people.
We'll remove all the lawyers. We'll remove all the legislation, except down to, the simplest of things that allow a society to function. That's how we would do it, and then start back at the very basic forms again of common sense and rule of law and the most basic common sense. Wait, you promised you would deliver that to him. You didn't. Okay, you got to pay him money, or her, the trader, right?
It all worked in the past. It could work even easier with technology today.
Oh, yeah. And the simpler is the better. We need to go back to the base. There's too much, law, litigation. And that's the way the politicians always deem themselves necessary, because they understand the legalese speak. A lot of them came from, type of legalese backgrounds, that sort of thing. But take a look at these. I hope you can see this clearly. Like the right picture looks like a volcanic eruption for me, but that's actually the fire that they lit up there. Now they purposely lit these chemicals on fire because it was going to take too long to transfer them from one car into a hazardous materials vehicle and then move it out. So the expediency to keep one of these main trunk rail hubs open in America as a thoroughfare was going to start taking billions off the economy every day if that set of rail lines was not open. So they decided to burn it instead of transfer it, which would take way, way more time and cleanup, and then push the cars off to the side, which they did with dozers, and then they rebuilt that section of track where the derailment was for that quarter mile in there. And, it dislodged also at one of the crossings. So they went back past the crossing and then all the way through where the fires were, and they rebuilt that section in just a matter of days. And they're still trying to get the chemical that spilled directly on the tracks. They can't really anymore because it's in the soil right there. So all those trains passing by are grabbing that on their carriages and wheels, etc., taking it further down the track. But, flying, there we go. Oh, come on, mouse. Yeah, but flying over, this is what it looks like. And I just saw some goes east, saw this come through the clouds in, one of those 5-second animations that shows you the weather pattern in the clouds moving through with the goes east satellites. Saw this, and it's massive. It is massive. It's like a volcanic eruption. But what's startling for me is on the edge of it. Look how it popped up, and then look how much heavier and denser it is. It's like a fog wall itself rolling through, like a dust storm that you would see out of one of the mummy movies rolling toward you. But this is the fallout, and it is, I'll give you some specifics where it moved to, because the flow in the jet stream and the wind patterns was all over the place during this event. It wasn't just one steady direction. So as you see, it went down that southeast direction. The black is the densest of the smoke column coming off of there. And you can see the altitude on AGL on how many meters that is. So that line there, a large amount of it stayed around 10,000 feet or under, which is definitely raining out in terms of anytime it rains, this stuff's coming down. The blue poked through 15,000 feet, and the aquas is somewhere around 18 and 19,000 feet. You'll see that headed over the major crop growing zones of southern Ontario, which is the main corn belt, at least one of them, sandwiched between the Great Lakes down there. In terms of corn, Ontario corn production, that's one of their main regions to produce. In addition, Ontario is a massive, massive agricultural production area there in Canada. And then you see where it's spilled out over Pennsylvania. The largest amount of Amish are there, and then over the farm fields in Ohio. So this is the trajectory of it. And then they've taken this since down offline. So you couldn't follow the plume to see where it was moving. Because I assure you that even though that's spread, as soon as the wind pattern moves, it's going to go over New York City, or if it bends back south-southwest, it'll head down toward Maryland. Like this is not, it's so dense, it's moving very slow in the air. And here's another thing that might shock you, car fans. 70 miles southeast of the chemical spill, apparently this driver was driving through a rainstorm, and this is what happened to the car with all the chemical in it. Look, it ate the bumper or the side mirror away in the plastic. That's permanent damage on the paint. The plastic's been eaten away, literally eaten away.
2 cars after driving through spurts of rain 70 miles southeast of the East Palestine incident. So those, and see, I have seen this before. See, that is what people see in their gutters coming off their roofs. And when it's coming out of gutter, it gets frothy, like frothy milk, basically.
Like chalky, frothy water.
Yeah. So this I have seen. You know, it almost looks like when you drive through the a highway that has salt on it, like in the East. You know what I mean? Like it's that gritty stuff, that gritty, salty snow. So that, yeah, see, that was not happening before. We can kind of figure, like, yes, that probably was not for certain happening before. People would have noticed this. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what scares me, is it might take the awareness of people's cars getting ruined before anybody really takes it seriously. Because how many people are really, into the car culture, and their car is the part of their persona, and they take so much pride in the car, like a lot of people in the States. So maybe it is that it'll take the destruction of their cars to actually bring some sort of reality to it. Like, whoa, this thing is real.
Mm-hmm.
That's scary, the way that kind of level of awareness, that red pilling needs to happen, where your car falls apart and the plastic melts off because of the rain you're driving through.
Yeah, it's like it's raining dead birds. Don't notice when it's my car. What the F, dude?
Yeah, you cracked my windshield. What cracked my windshield?
This is bullshit.
No, that's bird.
Yeah, that's bird. Because it seems like, I mean, the people returned, they didn't drop dead, so the initial toxicity must be, gone. But that's only the toxicity that will make you drop dead on the spot. That's not the toxicity that'll kill you 3 weeks later. Yeah, so we don't know.
Well, think about too, it's wintertime, so there's not really a lot of wildlife and insect life out there. Can you imagine if it was the middle of the summer and this happened, and just everything went silent because it got all killed off by the toxins? Can you imagine if every insect went silent, all the birds went silent in the middle of summer? That would be spooky. Ooh, but right now there's really not as much life, so you can't, again, compare apple to an apple on that.
Yeah, there's no crickets, there's no lightning bugs all of a sudden in the middle of the summer. You would know something is wrong,
Yeah, right?
Yeah, they find their first dead Sasquatches,
Maybe.
Maybe.
Okay, yeah. Speaking of spooky stuff, why don't you check out, do you see this person was in Canton. This is the interesting thing. Canton is the opposite direction where the wind flow was.
Yeah.
So Canton's 45 miles west of the flow. So the air currents are going generally to the east, either to the northeast, the southeast, or east. They're blowing toward New York. But this person's car is 45 miles back to the west of where the accident happened. And the fire was lit off. So how does that occur 45 miles west of the zone there? And again, you notice one thing, it's that chalky white. And I saw that guy boiling the pot of water, and it looked like he was boiling a pot of chalk water.
The guy boiling the chalk water, and you've probably seen the if not, well, you've probably seen them. Like I say, the rain from the gutters coming down, which is pretty much chalky.
I didn't see that one yet, but I'm sure I'll stumble upon it.
Yeah, I'll send it to you afterwards. But it's exactly as you would expect. It looks like somebody's, pouring water with milk in it out of a gutter, and it's frothy. It's, yeah, and like you said, he goes, this has never happened before. I forget where he was from the incident, but yeah, it was noticeable. There's no way that's not a big deal. Yeah.
Another big deal is for Like you and I, Craig, we've talked many a times about getting off centralized delivery systems and being able to grow your own food as being paramount to surviving through and thriving during these times. Well, even you as a home gardener, you wouldn't be able to plant into the soil. It would be so contaminated that your
Yeah.
ability or even opportunity to grow veg is totally gone. I don't care if you have the seeds or not. You're not going to want to uptake that into your food and then ingest it in your body. That's just a no-no.
Mm-hmm.
But this dot on the map here, are you seeing the green map? It says
I'm
Amish
seeing it.
population.
Yeah.
It's the highest density of Amish population anywhere in the United States, that all that smoke rolled over their properties and fields.
And Amish have been, well, I'm sure people listening know this, but Amish have been, beyond organic for what, at least 300 years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and they're the ones who brought us homeschooling. It was their legal cases, for religious freedom that allowed homeschooling to exist. They basically, beat the state, the federal government. The Supreme Court said, they won in a case that went to the Supreme Court, I believe. So, and then also, I believe they've been involved in litigation that, to preserve the individual's right to farm on their own property, which I know sounds absurd, but we know the government, we know that the beast does not want us to do that. So it's funny how vindictive all these things are, because anyone who knows the Amish knows, I mean, Pennsylvania and what Ohio just left of it, or west of it, that's like Amish land. I mean, that's really so deep Amish. You have so much rural communities, and to bomb that with toxicity, they're destroying biodiversity, microbiomes in the soil that probably exist nowhere else in this country. Yeah.
Yeah, they've been regenerative for a century.
Yeah.
So think about them, and just become an Amish for a second, that you've lived off the land your whole life. Everything you've ever consumed has been made on the property or traded with another property. And suddenly you have to go into a Western supermarket to buy all your food because your soil's too contaminated to grow your own food. Like, put that in perspective for a second. I don't know if it would be harder for us to say one day you can no longer buy anything from a supermarket or store. You have to produce everything on your land. Go. It's very much the same shock value that would occur if everything was ripped away from us and we did have to start growing everything from scratch to provide every single input into our lives. It would be just as much of a shock as them getting the land ripped away, where they have to rely then on the supply chain. And imagine the chemicals in the food that their bodies aren't used to, preservatives. It would make them sick. They'd all get sick from eating the food. I really have tried to change my diet coming back to the States, because when I first got here, there's something weird in the food here. It just gets you. I don't know, like, there's something weird in the food here. I'm just going to say, I lived over in Asia for, a better part of 2 decades off and on. I was eating a very different diet. Well, not really, different kind of carbohydrates coming in with a lot of fresh vegetables and some meat. I mean, we drink beers all the time, and here I'd have one beer and explode into like a pill boy over here, like a doughboy or something. The food really, there's something in it here that's very different to make you gain weight in comparison to, I'm on a farm. I'm doing way kind of all crazy exercises and walking with heavy stuff and lifting things but still, to gain weight when you're working like that, like in Asia, you'd be losing weight because, I don't know, there's something in the fat food here. But long story, like the Amish coming off of 100% clean diet, jumping into our Western diet with all the preservatives, they're going to get sick.
Yeah, they're going to get sick. And, having grown up on the Pennsylvania-Delaware border, there was Amish carts going by all the time, and I've been back, since then many times. And, what people who aren't familiar with the Amish, if you're not familiar with them, that's just fine, because they only exist, in concentrated areas here and there. But, that would take their dignity from them. They're not completely unworldly. I mean, they do know what's going on in the world, some more than others, but they all have a choice to leave at a certain time where they get to go explore the world for a year or something like that and see if they want to come back or not. But if you look at, most come back by choice, and it's a unique lifestyle, and it's strange if you go and visit, but yet they do it. They like it. No one's forcing them to continue. And it's to destroy their land that they need to live. It's just honestly, it's like the Native Americans. It's like killing the buffalo. you're taking this deep aspect of their dignity and their identity and how they live. And right now they're financially secure because of, family land that's been passed down forever. But if all of a sudden they need money to, buy everything on Amazon Prime, and start going to the supermarket, I don't think that they don't have a financial infrastructure for that, as far as I know.
It's cash only. And at least the Amish farms around here, they're minimum 500 acres and 200 people live on there. So however many families that would entail, they would have to sell off part of that, or I'm just worried about people being forced off their farmland. I think I have a couple. Let me kick this back on here for you a second. I had some numbers on what the percentages were of the landholders in Ohio. Oh, here it is. It was the very next slide. There you go. So if you look at Ohio, they have 75,000 farms, but most of them are small family farms, 500 acres or under. And you might go, 500 acres, that's huge. For a farm, that's not really. And that's even on the large end out here. You go some of these farms that are out in Kansas, they're 100,000 acres. That one farm, mechanized, they go miles before they even turn the equipment around once. Somebody was telling me that Trades Ag, that when they originally, this is back probably like the 1980s. Oh, there's a great movie, King Corn, King, like a K-I-N-G, Corn. You got to watch that movie. They talked about the same thing. When the agribusiness would come in, they would buy an old family's full tract of, 50, 100, 200 acres or whatever. The first thing they do was rip down the old farmhouse because it would make them turn the tractors more. So they went through and actively ripped down all the homes around the areas and anything, grain storage silos, anything. They just scraped to the ground. So the tractors could go through with their massive amounts of discs without ever having to turn the tractor around, because every time they had to turn, it cost them money. So King Corn, that's a great movie to watch. But you got to realize that almost all these farms are real small holder, 20, 50, 100, 150, 200, and then the large ones at 5. The farmers won't want to leave out of here either. I'm going to state something, knowing and living in a farm community for a little while now, they're not leaving. Like you said, they're in 5 generations, 3 generations, 6 generations deep on the land. The money doesn't mean anything. You got to understand there's some things in life that are so valuable that you can't put a price on it, where the dollar value means zero, literally. And to have them get off their family's land that they've been there for 150 years, 120 years, they're just going to say no. Now, perhaps I'm going to go on the deep end here and say perhaps this would be a test run to see how easy it would be to remove farmers and the Amish, which are 2 of the most staunch, hardy groups that would be like, get off my land, we're not leaving, to test it on the most hardy of the people first versus going into a city, which would be almost everybody would say yes to leave. It's not my apartment. I don't care. Give me the money. I'm out of here. Versus having a family farm that you've been on, since you remember your grandfather as a little kid and he was still owning the same land. I just really, nothing surprises me anymore. But these statistics are pretty interesting. So think about this area. Where do you get cheese from, Craig? This is a pop-up question. I guess this is a common sense question, one of those man on the street interviews. Craig, where does cheese come from?
I couldn't have told you, but the slide here says first in production of Swiss cheese. So I guess a lot comes from Ohio.
Yeah, but what's the cheese made of?
It's made of milk.
Of course. Yeah. And how does milk get made?
Well, there's these cows. There's these walking vegetables that make milk.
Right. And imagine what the cows are eating off of the ground to produce that milk.
Oh, dusted grass with
contaminated dusted grass. The cows are going to love it. It's going to be like a new herb for them. They're going to have a new spice on the grass. They're going to love it.
It's like powdered milk on the grass. It's great.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. So that's a big deal. That's not good at all.
That is a huge one. Like nobody's thinking about the cattle industry or the dairy industry on how much this affects them. Like they're not going to be able to graze their herds or their, you get that, right? They're not going to be able to put cow on grass. It's going to go strictly to 100% feedlot where they're going to bring that silage in there, that feed, whatever, or they're not.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I throw in there real quick is that it's one of the huge Agenda 2030 things is ultimately just well, I believe it's one of the it's destroy the sense of place. One of the things that America is lacking, one of the things that it's suffering from, is a sense of place, state identity. And so in a sense, to say that we are Amish in Ohio and Pennsylvania, to say like we are farmers of many generations in Tennessee, that is kryptonite to the globalists. That is like one of their number one things. That is one of the number one things that they just absolutely just have disdain for and want to destroy. And it's very heartbreaking to see that might be one of the number one globalist targets right now, is to destroy a sense of place, all state sovereignty, all state identity, destroyed, even down to the Amish. And how much more ruthless and psychopathic can you be? Yeah.
You forgot the Starbucks drive-through right next to the Tesla charging station.
Yeah, if they actually had like drive-through Starbucks Tesla charging stations, that'd be so awesome. I would definitely get my non-fat Frappuccino double shot right then, and
Would you drink the milk from Ohio?
I would sell out for a Tesla charging station at the Starbucks. I mean,
drinking
come on.
Fresh milk from Ohio.
Yeah, well, fresh milk comes from the sky now.
Sicko. Yeah, so you have to really imagine that what we know is the dairy production and the milk production in that area is going to be greatly affected. Now notice that. What do I see? Second in egg production.
Oh,
okay. All right, eggs are probably going to go to what, $10 or $12 a dozen, and then third in tomatoes and pumpkins. Now that's a huge thing too. But tomatoes are really easy to grow, and I might add, if you're going to do tomatoes, just after me experimenting for many years, cherry tomatoes, the little small round ones, that it could be yellow cherry, could be sweet, sugar sweet. I don't know. There's a huge amount of cherry tomatoes, chocolate. The small round ones, you're going to get the most bang for your buck. You're going to get less rot. You're going to be able to harvest every day, and you're going to get it before the birds. And trust me, these cherry tomatoes are the way to go. The little round ones, not the big ones, not the Roma, but the small round one. They're just classified as cherry tomatoes. It covers the whole range of them. But you can grow that pretty easily. Pumpkins, not so much. But again, the pumpkins are going to be on ground when they do that. So you have to think about pumpkin skins are going to be uptaking the chemical, as well as the roots and the whatever else. And then the bell peppers. Okay, sweet corn. Now you got to understand, corn is a massive, massive feeder. They have to put more fertilizer on corn than any other crop except sorghum, which is part of the corn family. Now that's going to uptake everything through the roots. So corn is going to uptake that toxic material much faster than, let's say, wheat would. Cucumbers and then chickens, 8th in chickens, 2nd in egg production. So where does that leave us with, the amount of, let me see, I'm coming back to you. How does that leave us then with the food prices moving forward? Just knowing that little factoid there, right there.
And that's definitely it's going to be inflationary for sure, but also just outright just shortages. I mean, I've been surprised where the supply chain here in Arizona has not been that bad. I was in California for a while and actually was doing pretty good there. But here we're starting to see like Trader Joe's not have Kerrygold butter, which I know is imported, but at times supermarkets not having eggs. And that's like right now, egg prices are on the way up. And oftentimes there's not the variety that you'd expect. And, I would say that I tend to buy the pasture raised, eggs and such like that. And so that supply chain is a little bit one-off, but going to the regular grocery stores, we're already having egg shortages, and the prices, whether you buy the fancy eggs or whether you buy the cheap ass eggs, they are going up. And one thing about the pumpkins is, of course, there's pumpkins, but of course, along with that you've got all squash, and you have winter squash and such like that. Now, I know that pumpkins can kind of grow in a lot of different parts of the country, but along with pumpkins, your squash, your winter squash, and that's people probably don't think about squash a whole lot, but we do grow a lot of it, and we do use it here in the country, certainly, and I would say that for every pumpkin, there's probably many, many more pounds equal in many pounds equal greater in other squashes that probably are consumed for every one pumpkin. So it's devastating.
We have to think also wild foraging chickens. If you want to free range the chickens, you have to understand where this toxicity is hit. They're either going to be in a farm complex under tin, under roof, or they're not. Like they've lost the ability to free range anything because those chickens scratching up. And, we got 11 chickens out here now. We're getting about 8 eggs a day. They're scratchers. So imagine if you're free ranging a bunch of chickens around and, all that toxicity everywhere. So it's taken anything on the wild range of things, and everything's going to have to come into a feed house and chicken house. You're going to have to put it completely under roof, and they're not going to be able to touch the natural soils again. And that's the way the chicken industry is going to need to move, especially in this area, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Ontario and Canada, and probably the Maritimes. It looks like that plume was heading over toward the Maritimes of Canada and Nova Scotia. I wanted to talk about hand-cranked radios for just a second because I think they're incredibly important. I myself, I did hours and hours of research on the best hand-cranked radio that could also be a phone charger, emergency light, be able to listen to radio stations, the NOAA weather station in case something happened and you were power out, you could still know what the weather was coming. I personally own this one, the Eaton Red Cross FRX3. It's all hand cranked, and there's a small solar panel on top of it. So it's multiple options for recharging, including plug-in. So if something were to happen, hand cranking is the next best option. I would love solar, but it might be a cloudy day. You might be inside a house, but you're going to have to create the power somehow. You hand crank it, and ergonomically, it slides right in like a book on a bookshelf. I can't believe how long the battery charge lasts on this thing. Even if you leave it up somewhere, like I say, on a bookshelf or in a closet for 6 months, it still has almost a full charge after that period of time.
These crank lights and radios are a must-have. The fact is, if you live anywhere where there's going to be weather, you're going to want to know what's going on. You're going to want to be able to see. And not only that, you're going to want to be able to charge your devices so that you can communicate if the power is out. This is something that you should have if you live anywhere where there's tornadoes, hurricanes, blizzards, etc. It's not whether or not the power is going to go out, it's just when. That's going to happen. So these are something that you should have handy with you in your car and your backpack. 2 or 3 of them actually would be a good thing to have in several places so that you know that you're going to be able to have light, you're going to have information, and maybe communication. Those are 3 main things that you need. And plus, it's cool. You can listen to the radio, which makes the time go by if you're waiting for anything, waiting for the power to come back on. You're going to want to keep your mind occupied, and you're going to want to be able to see what you're doing and also be able to communicate if there is the ability to communicate, and you don't want your devices to be dead when that happens.
In an emergency, you would know where people were moving to. For example, out here in East Tennessee, we have massive wildfires sometimes, and they'll be on the radio broadcasting exactly where the fires are moving. And this is off of what you consider like your AM, FM channels that you would get on your car radio. Depends on which frequency that they're using for that, but they will absolutely tell you where emergency resources are stationed. So if you have to abandon your car, you could be able to get to another place as long as you know the roads, or you might have a map. You'll be able to get to some help or main roads where there's emergency vehicles transiting up and down there. Have this on the go, that it's be able to put it in your hand and still listen to something. It's very lightweight as well. What happens with your communications, or even listening to something, to be able to understand what's going on in the environment around you? And that's the key to surviving. And Ransom, I know you said this a few times, is understanding your environment, being able to manipulate your environment, and being able to move through that environment to get yourself to safety, to reassess the situation.
Not only that, this is one of the cheapest ways to have insurance, so that whatever happens, if you're on the move, if you have to grab your bag and go, or if you're just at home trapped when the power's out, not only do you know what's going on, but you know if the situation is going to worsen. Imagine all those people that were in several of the different hurricanes that we've had the last couple of years where the power was out. There were a lot of people that didn't know that was coming, and unfortunately they're no longer with us. But I'm sure that people that were prepared and had some radio, they knew where to go, they knew where the relief aid was going to be, they knew which directions the storms were coming, and they knew which directions the water was coming from. So this is a must-have for anybody that wants to know what's going on, and also just having the light.
And you can click on the link in the description box below. And remember, any purchase that you make with the links, whether it be through the podcast in the description box or on the videos across the multiple platforms after we stream, helps us keep this type of information and this show on air so we can continue to bring information and share this information so then you can share with others. And this is truly how it's going to be, is sharing of information, forming communities, and have others that also have some of the same information so we can work as a group versus being on your own alone. That's going to make a huge world of difference, sharing information in communities.
If you wanted to start prepping and taking it serious to get some of these very inexpensive tools that are necessities, why not be prepared for what might happen? Click some of the links, help yourself.
If you appreciate this type of information, click on that link in the description box below. Support our broadcast, our continued mission of bringing you information that can enhance our lives, make our lives more comfortable as we move through this transition.
And so you've got because you have cows, of course, but also you've got, of course, chickens, of course, turkeys.
Yeah.
But then also you've got goats,
Lamb,
I'm not sure, you
sheep.
got lamb, sheep, you got, for what it's worth, alpacas. We don't tend to eat those, but some people do anyway. But they certainly exist out there. But also, of course, all your deer, all of your elk, all of your different big cats out there, all of your
killed off the
coyotes.
entire ecosystem. Can you imagine that? They've been trying to take away the foods for the survivors of people who knew how to wild forage and hunt. As when the food shortages come, supermarkets are going to run out, but people are going to be hunting deer. They're going to be hunting whatever they can get. And you're taking out that whole thing of all the people who are ready to prep to get out there to go hunting to supplement their food supplies and get off the system. You just wipe that completely out. They're back on the system again.
And then you get into, I think it's, I've heard you mention before, I know I've seen it several places, but the one things that don't die in these bad situations are wolves. They'll just start eating people. So you're going to get these big ass wolf packs that just start, eating alligators, people, whatever, So yeah, that's really strange because people oftentimes think, well, I'll just go hunt. And I just laugh my ass off because I'm like, I'll tell you what, I do hunt. If you're fat, if your fat domesticated ass wants to come out with me, bring it. Okay, just try to be quiet.
Yeah, get your ass up at 3 a.m. to get out there and settle down, be in the stand before everything comes through. Yeah, sure you can hunt.
Yeah,
and did you get all the game cams up and follow the patterns for the last 3 months to even know where they're at? Yeah, oh, sure you can.
Yeah, when I hear that, I'm just going to go hunt and I'll just have my rifle and shoot a deer at half a mile away. I'm like, whatever. I'll find you.
Yeah, brought my shotgun to get the deer. Dude, you got slugs or what do you got? Buckshot or slugs? And like, well, I got shotgun shells.
Yeah. Let me look at that. Let me see. Number 6 bird shot. Yeah, that's going to work.
That'll work.
No problem. You can take one down at half a mile with that.
I can take down a black bear with bird shot. I can hunt.
Yeah. So anyway,
that was a joke, by the way. Anybody, I didn't mean that seriously.
Yeah, that's not life coach advice. Just and if you find yourself in that situation, if you have number 6 buckshot, if you have number 6 shot and you have a machete, you might want to just go for it like Rambo because
Hey, can I add something to that?
Yes.
Now, for those of you who thought that you could go out and hunt, at first it's a skill. Second, you need to have the land and the permission because you'll get shot going on somebody's land. If it really comes to that and you're poaching on somebody's land, you might just disappear in the woods. And that's a no BS assessment. Truly, like if you get out in the countryside where it's really more remote and people have their lands, they're not going to want you out there, especially if society's swung that far already. There's already probably been an enormous amount of problems. Robberies and all these kind of things, shootings, people breaking in, they're going to be very, very, very skittish at best. And if you're out there traipsing around the woods looking to go hunt, you're going to have a problem with the locals that are there. But the stories from the 1930s during the Great Depression, the woods were hunted out as far as you could go in any direction. And you have to realize that was in the 1930s when there was 5 times less people and the woods were completely hunted out. Even like chipmunks were gone. And they knew how to shoot then too. All the kids grew up with BB guns and stuff and everybody knew how to shoot then.
And there's pictures of it, and it's very, very sad because, humans, contrary to popular belief, and this includes American Indians too, are not necessarily all hardwired with an idea of conservation. So we will kill everything until we starve. Conservation is, we may not like the government, but if it wasn't for Fish and Game, if it wasn't for Teddy Roosevelt, there wouldn't be animals right now. So even though Fish and Game has done some pretty boneheaded things, but still. It is. If you look at the hunting pictures from the Great Depression, it is really, really rough to see because, they would hunt with.
They would go for sparrows.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy.
They clear cut at the forest, and they would hunt deers with frigging landmines and claymores. I mean, it was rough. They weren't hunting, and there was no sense of sportsmanship whatsoever. And if you do, and for individuals, I mean, there is public land, it's there, but I would just give that slight little bit of warning is if you are if you don't know your way around public land, if you haven't spent time out there and shit doesn't hit the fan, don't go there. Unless you live there, do it, know it, just grow some microgreens. Yeah.
Fully hippie, dude. We can. Can you see the drainage basin map now?
Yeah, and this is super important. I'm glad you're covering this because I don't really understand this one.
So you're looking at the Ohio River drains into the Mississippi. And it's all these basins that come down out of the mountain streams, and then it comes into the larger tributaries. But you can see the tributary, the way it comes down, it passes through Ohio, and then it skirts southern Indiana, and then it comes down, and then it joins the Mississippi. Now, we in Tennessee, that drains up to meet the Ohio River. So it looks like it's going to the north, but it's really almost going to the northwest there off the Tennessee River. But you got to think about how much irrigation comes off of this river alone, the Ohio River, into the farm fields of Ohio and into Indiana fields too, which is the grain or the corn capital of, along with Iowa, of the United States. But how much of this irrigation water comes from the Ohio River? They're selling it by acre feet to the farmers. That's how much. Like an acre foot, you might use an acre foot for a whole year of water in your home for one person. Right? So they're not buying like we do. They're buying acre feet out of the river on water rights. So how much of this is so contaminated that they won't be able to use it to irrigate crops this year? Okay. You're like, well, big deal. It still rains. Well, no, yeah, maybe not really. Look out west. They're still in a drought out there.
Yeah. And like, just to throw in there real quick, I mean, if you think about farming, and I've only done a slight bit of, you could say, professional farming, and it was organic farming. And I would say the number one issue with farming is water. And yeah, it does rain. It rains everywhere, but it doesn't rain many places enough to actually farm. And that's even if you're doing organic, bio-intensive farming, with it's very difficult, and you don't have a lot of options. When water comes, I was farming in Boulder, Colorado, and when the water comes down the mountains, you have to open the gates to get to you, and then you have to make sure everything is clear. You're out there with a shovel, make sure your fellow farmers didn't leave the gate open or try to nab some from you. It's a big deal to get your pond, your reservoir filled that then you pump from. And so really, it isn't like farmers have a lot of options. And if their options to get water are contaminated, it's over. It really is over, because there's no other way to get the amount of water you need to grow even 5 acres unless you're getting it through irrigation upstream. That's just my, somewhat professional opinion. Yeah.
No, that's true. And then you got to think about, 50 miles either side of the river is where they're able to pump through into. Now, down the Mississippi, it's a little bit wider. Sometimes they can go 100 miles off the Mississippi, depending if it was part of the original TVA projects that they've upgraded and kept functional. They can come more than 100 miles off the Mississippi. So as you look at this map, remember, it's going to be both sides of the river going out 50 miles off of there. Now, the whole thing was, are the forever chemicals in there registerable, measurable, or are they going to get washed down in one giant event? Now, if they do get washed down in one giant event, look what's at the end of that Mississippi River down there. Gulf of Mexico. So remember the Corexit with the BP oil spill. Now, you got to wonder what this kind of chemical mix with the Corexit is going to create, what kind of toxic mix. Corexit was meant to break down oil, molecular bonds of the oil, and take it from a longer chain into a short chain. And then, that's how the oil would break down. Unfortunately, that stuff on the top of your skin is oil. So people were getting all kind of skin lesions and things because it was meant to. It was meant to break down oil. Well, that's what your body's skin coating is. There's oil all over your skin. Why do you feel greasy at the end of the day? They can't hide it once it gets to the Mississippi. Everything up and down there, when they tell the people don't irrigate, or once it actually gets out into the Gulf of Mexico and starts that mass kill off of everything out there, I mean, how are they going to hide all the fish bubbling up from the bottom of the ocean? See, during the Corexit time, there was a huge amount of dead fish too, but they were trying to stop all the reporters from going down there. So I'm wondering if we'll see something very similar to what they tried to do, a media blackout during the Gulf oil spill, the BP oil spill. You know, they were limiting where reporters could go on beaches and what they could do with flying drones, and they wouldn't let them take boats offshore to really see what was going on. Even fishermen that were there, you know, 5th generation fishermen were not allowed to, you know, get out of port with their boats because they didn't want anybody to see what was going on. But just think about that blue line encapsulated in the red, not being able to pull water from there to irrigate anywhere in that red circle area. So forget the fish. If there's a mass catfish die-off, you know that stuff's nasty because catfish can pretty much eat anything. So imagine if there's a mass catfish die-off and you get like these, you know, Mississippi River got 100-pound catfish in and they're just all floating to the surface. You'd be like, whoa, you wiped out the catfish population. Sheesh. That stuff must be like kryptonite. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's rough because a catfish is kind of like a swimming bear. I mean, a bear can get in your garage and like drink your damn 90 weight oil and just, you know, have a bad day and be fine. I mean, you know, they're freaking bulletproof. So, I mean, if you can kill a catfish, that's some seriously nuclear stuff. That's nasty. So yeah, catfish don't die easy. So, and that's the worst thing is when they start floating up. See, it reminds me of we had here in, I'll just say I don't like pinpoint it at all, but let's just say in the Phoenix area we had some drainage ditches that got closed for maintenance. They get the silt out of them because we live in a massive flash flood area. We have to manage these massive flash floods, which is done very well, but they keep carp out there to keep the big ditches clean and things like that. There's kind of an ecosystem that is preserved, and it's one of the few things the government does extremely well, actually. But anyway, when they have to drain the ditches out, which are massive, they don't quite get. They try to get the carp out, but they don't get all of them, and so you see some carp flapping around, and you feel bad, and you're like, man, I want to do something about it, but I go, well, I could, with that hunter mindset, go down there and just grab a bucket, grab a couple and eat them. But I'm like, no way, because that is some toxic. Those ditches are not cool, you know. So it sucks because by the time they see those catfish floating, it's kind of the same situation we have here in, you know, Phoenix area. It's that, you know, that thing is deadly. You can't eat it, and it sucks because you're seeing it die, you're seeing it suffer, you're seeing it flip around. But you also know that there's nothing you can do. It's just dead. It doesn't. You can't eat it. It's a weird feeling, kind of hard to articulate. But if you're a fisherman or a hunter and you see the animal, oh look, it died. Anybody who's ever been a hunter, if you've ever seen like a deer or an elk get whacked and you saw it, you're like, oh yeah. You're like, that's mine, you know. And you toss it in your truck and off you go, you know. But when you see a fish floating in, you know, on the Tennessee River, yeah, that's very unfortunate. But you're not going to want to put that. You're not going to want it. So it's going to be a real moment of, I think, collective realization at that moment, because that shit's gotten very, very real at that point.
Yeah, and the fish too contaminated. You couldn't even use it for soil enhancement either, because then you're just contaminating your fruit trees or whatever's out there. And
don't toss it in the compost pile. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you couldn't. It would toxify it. Yeah, because, you know, if you were gonna, like you're talking about, what if a grizzly bear was attacking a moose, but you only had a moose tag? Would you still take the grizzly bear both and just say it was an accidental shot?
Yeah, say I basically Texas heart shot at the bear to shoot the moose, and
I got them both. I don't have a tag for the bear, but you know,
a
bear tag this year.
The bear was in the way.
Yeah, no kidding. Jumped at the last second. Sorry.
Yeah, the bear tried to save the moose at the last second. Yeah.
Here's a wild one. Now, when I told you there was a fire at this renewable energy
Yes.
company, this is not the same fire. This is a very different one. Just yesterday on the 16th, 5 acres of plastic processing chemicals at a plastic making facility all caught on fire with the same thing. And guess what's directly east of where all this is burning? Massive citrus orchards. Same, but different. Like, this chemical composition is going to come all over those orchards. They're going to be rendered useless. And the thing about the citrus orchards, they weren't really in good health anyway. They were really damaged after a few of these last hurricanes. So they weren't in the most prime condition. And that's one of the reasons that orange juice is at an all-time record high, is from the loss in the citrus crops for 2 massive hurricanes to come barreling across Florida. But for this to then burn and then cover those same citrus orchards that were trying to heal themselves. But when I look at it, I hope everybody can laugh at this graphic here, because I really look at the government agencies and the EPA like this. That's all they do. They go out for a quick cursory look.
Yeah.
Can you see my cartoon, Craig?
I can see it. Everything looks okay here. Yeah. Yeah, it's very true. And, one thing that gets me is it seems like prior to 2019, buildings had fire suppression. If nothing else, it was OSHA standards. Here in America, it's very, very hard to make a building that's not, that doesn't get inspected when it's built. And I worked in construction when I was younger, and it can be very, very annoying, of course, but there's reasons for all these standards. And government bureaucracy and everything else. But truly also, when we have earthquakes here in America, our buildings don't fall down. There's a reason for that. Well, depending on where they are in the country. And so buildings, even if it's a chicken barn, the big, agribusiness chicken barns, they have fire suppression. They have to. You literally can't do business without it. And so to me, when like that factory that burned that you just showed the picture of, that would have had fire suppression. I don't believe for a second that it didn't. And fire suppression.
Yeah, and a renewable energy factory too, with all that high-tech equipment in there, man, that would be the state-of-the-art facility with some of the best. And they probably have halon and all kind of other gas, because they didn't want to ruin the equipment in there. Just in addition to having water coming out of the pipes, they would probably have gas suppression or inert gases to put the fire out in addition to water.
Yeah, and prior to January 2019, it wouldn't have, Like, I've worked in technology forever, and I'm like, yeah, everybody knows that it used to be CO2, now it's halon. So if you're in the server room and something fires off the system, hold your breath and run.
Yeah, right. They're not going to flood that with water. They're not going to do it because you damage everything. They're going to use gas.
Yeah. So we used to have fire suppression systems in this country. We used to, including warehouses, including chicken mega barns. And now, well, sorry, one spark and there's nothing we can do. The entire thing is going up. So just wanted to throw that in there. I don't know what happened to fire suppression in January of 2019, but it seems like, I don't know, something went wrong. Are we under attack?
Could I tell you another one?
Yes.
Up in Massachusetts, they had a potato facility burned to the ground, and the potatoes turned to ash. We're talking about hundreds of tons of potatoes burned to the ground completely, and all the potatoes turned to ash, as in super dry ash, like you've had a really hot fire that, at the end of the morning. That's my story. Like, how does potato turn to ash? I saw Sassafras Red there. Hey, thanks for commenting on my channel as well. I see your comments, and yes, I do recognize the name. So thank you for staying with me all these years.
Oh, yeah. There we go. Very strange to see all these products all unavailable. They don't need rare earth minerals. Yeah, it's true. So we're seeing a lot of that a lot of quite unique.
Let me put up the map here, if you don't mind. I hate to keep jumping in on you, man. I'm bad at that. Stop me.
Oh, no. We're just, this is fun. It's one of the things about, it's good to catch up. And that's a big one. See, I'm glad you're showing that map, because that's the thing, is that I know that it's been on the mindset of many individuals is, where is that water flowing? Like, what direction, where is it going? If you're upstream, great. But
if you're upstream, follow the red line. That's the direction it's heading from Ohio. But you got to realize that's only the point of where they actually flared everything off of the town where the accident occurred. the drift cloud is way up past Buffalo, way into Canada. So what are the tributaries and watersheds up there in Canada doing? And where does it take that contaminated water in Canada? That's the next set of questions.
Yeah. So we're all kind of accumulating the fallout and seeing what's going to happen because we don't exactly know. I guess we shall see. It's one of those unfortunate things is that the people are, it's just sort of like the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines getting blown up. And I've heard from sources, reliable ones, that there are a good number of people who've come forth and kind of set like dead man switches, you might say. A lot of people knew about this. A lot of people did not agree with it. A lot of people have come forth with information and put it in like lawyers' hands, basically. They just didn't want to come forth, but wanted the info out there. And so in a sense, there's a lot of people who were just afraid ultimately to come forth, who were aware of what happened because it involved a lot of people. People knew, but now like the Seymour Hersh story is out, there's people who have kind of gone from, I want it in my will that this comes out to now maybe I'll come out. So there is a tremendous amount of there's a tremendous amount of info coming out because now that it's blown open, people are like, well, maybe I won't. Maybe I will take this knowledge that I have and I will just share it, through high level through high level lawyers and things like that. So this is happening. And so the thing about the situation right now is we'll see how it pans out. We'll see how it pans out. Because right now it is really citizen journalists. I mean, some people, you've got politicians playing their games and such like that, but really, we are living in a time that I think is very inspiring of, if this is as bad as we think it might be, it's going to be like you and I and little shows like this and citizen journalists. Because if you think about it, that's the only source getting this out. That's the only source getting this out, But it is getting out. That's the thing.
Well, that was the thing. The Twitter world today let all of this trend. Now, if this would have been last year when Elon didn't have control of Twitter, this would have been a suppressed story where you would not have been able to share anything. So the ability to share information, again, is really what got the ball rolling on this whole information awareness. Now it's up on the highest echelons of news across the planet, so you can't put it back in the bottle. Genie ain't going back in this time. With that massive storm front that passed through over the last day or two, it cleaned the air out. So once the fire stopped, then the air was all pushed. So yeah, they can, with a straight face, say, yeah, the air monitoring there is showing clean air. Well, that would make sense because storm front passes through, blowing through at 50 miles an hour, anything in the air, all the clean air is behind it. I'm just wondering, as they test over the next few days, when that starts to percolate back up from the ground again, will it hit their monitors? Because at 50 miles an hour, on a 2-day rainstorm, you can clear pretty much anything out for a bit. But then after that, at what point does that fresh air, intrusion, wall of fresh air stop, and then things get still again, and then the air monitoring quality will change?
We'll see how this one all pans out. It does definitely not look, I mean, it's one of those things where we'll see the extent this really pans out. But
Craig, just knowing the agricultural plight that we're in might already give you a 2 to 3 week head start on getting on this in front of people in case you need to get supplies or something, or, move location, or just adjust your strategy now that you're in, a lot of people that were in there got shaken up in the event. But if you're in those areas downwind and you understand what's coming, perhaps there's a way to exit or, do something 2 to 3 weeks in advance of everybody else, which would give you a great advantage.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The fringe dwellers, as Stuart Wild labeled them, they'll always be a week, a month, a year ahead, whatever needs to be, they'll be there and they'll be ahead of the game because Catherine Austin Fitts, we all know her, and I don't agree with everything, every aspect of where she's coming from. But one of the things that she did say that I think has always really, really stuck with me is wealth going forward, of course, is wealth as it always has been, but also one of the essential aspects of wealth is mobility. You know, can you move? You know, so it's one of the things that we're working on is a sprinter, is an RV. You know what I mean? Like, can you get out of town? You know, and can you sustain your income? You know, or do you have enough money anyway? And do you have access to it? So really, it's one of the things that I think about is where, yes, you know, still working on the ranch, still working on, you know, everything that you would do in place to, you know, have a homestead, of course, but also mobility. You know what I mean? Like the people in Ohio, you know, regardless of what comes of this, maybe some of them, mobility, if you got that RV, that might be what saves your ass. You know? Yeah, mobility is going to be important, I think, going forward. I mean, it sucks because you want to build your homestead and it takes so much effort, but you may have to haul ass. It's possible, you know?
Yeah,
So,
because think
yeah.
back to the Civil War in, say, 1860s here. You know how remote it was in the Southeast U.S. in 1860? Like there were not even barely roads. They were like horse paths. But during that time, pretty much everything in the Southeast U.S. was completely destroyed by Union Army coming through. And you might think, oh, we'll hide way out here. You know, we're way at the end of a road. We're the last pole up here on the electricity line. Okay. But they found farmhouses tucked into the forest way back in the 1860s. Like, come on. There weren't even roads. It was footpaths going to a log cabin in the forest in the 1860s, and they burned it down. There's an expression, as Sherman went through Georgia. I don't know if you've ever heard this expression before. It means complete and total destruction of something. So if you see something that's a complete wreck, and I would, before I would make fun and say a complete train wreck, you know, that used to describe something horrific and, you know, huge damage because the weight of the trains thing. You would say, oh man, that looks like what Sherman went through Georgia right there, because there was so much destruction. It was anything that they saw, they destroyed in front of them. And you might think you were safe, you know, as far out as you might be, but if you're going to pick up and run, like really, you know, we have a house and we got a lot of stuff in the house here for, you know, working around, like all the tools and things. Like, what are you going to take with you, really? Like, what are the things that you'd bail with? What can you put in a car? What 100 pounds of stuff could you take with you that would be essential? That if you have to leave, you can't come back to your house. What are the things you're taking with you? Like the medical kits, that'd be first on my priority list right there. Medical kits, some storable foods, portable stoves, any kind of thing that runs on propane, because you can buy those tanks anywhere. But having the stove where you can cook out once you get somewhere is a different thing. You know, you'd have to just make a list of things that you would, you know, instantly throw into the car as you're running out the door. You know, you got to have a go bag in the safe or, you know, something like this. I mean, really, what's your list? I mean, you don't have to speak it because I know we both have stuff that we wouldn't want to disclose, but you know, really, what's the list of people's top things that, again, if you had to start life over in a different state or a different country, like what are the things that you would take with you if you could? I mean, a handful. I backpacked when I was younger. And when I talk about it, I wasn't backpacking like, you know, but through Europe, but backpacking in India, in Thailand, wow, and these kind of countries, right? Africa, South Africa, Botswana, Namibia, Swaziland, Lesotho, that whole South Africa area, Zimbabwe. Backpacking really taught me a lot of things about what is the most essential things to carry with you to keep going. Because back then there was really not very much internet. I'm talking about the early to mid 90s. It was like your Lonely Planet book and tales from other travelers. But one thing was always the same of, you know, your hygiene kit, the clothes that you needed to keep yourself warm. And, you know, what were the essentials on that? I mean, you always had your core kit that you had to carry with you, and you were able to put it on your back and actually walk it to the next destination. So you got to think to that mind frame of, I have to walk out the back of my house with just a backpack, like take it down to that level. What are you going to take with you?